and welcome to Conversations on Climate. My name is Chris Caldwell, and this series is produced by United Renewables in collaboration with the London Business School Alumni Energy Club. Today we're lucky enough to be talking to Kritika Kumar, who's a digital transformation expert based out of Hong Kong. I met Kritika through London Business School Alumni Energy Club. We're both alumni and we're both highly passionate about the energy transition and transformation. Kritika has dedicated her career to smartening up buildings, creating efficiencies and creating really significant energy savings. She's an expert on the region, the Asia Pacific region, and I'm sure we'll have some fascinating insights into Hong Kong, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and what parts smart technologies plays in the energy transition. Kritika, thanks very much for joining us. This wonderful world that we live in, where you can be in Hong Kong, I can be in London, we can be having these types of conversations. It's fantastic.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to this platform so I could share more about this and how we are looking into decarbonization.
Yeah, we're here to have a conversation about climate and all things CO2 and carbon, and for you to give us your perspective from a hugely dynamic and innovative part of the world in Hong Kong, with your own speciality coming in from technology and how technology interacts with energy. So with the Hong Kong kind of top-down approach, where the pressure for environmental change seems to come from a governmental level rather than the kind of bottom-up approach seems to be happening in Europe. Would you see that Hong Kong is further ahead or behind on the curve? Where do you see Hong Kong is in relation to its environmental initiatives as compared to, say, London or Paris or New York?
I would say quite behind in comparison to, London or other regions. Setting targets is a great way to start, but I think even those targets were not very ambitious when they were set. And that's just step one, that's tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more that needs to be done beyond setting targets, right, from the government perspective. But now we are seeing, like in the latest update to the Climate Action Plan for 2050, we see some concrete steps or concrete targets around the time frame of 2035. So just as an example, for commercial buildings, there's a target to reduce the carbon dioxide emission by 15 to 20% by 2035. Then there's also renewable energy target, which Hong Kong didn't even have. In the current mix, renewable energy is 0.1%. But given the land constraints, I guess, there has not been that much of an ambitious way to set up renewable in Hong Kong. But now there's a target of 7.5% to 10% till in 2035. The other major thing that the government has started to put targets for is electric vehicles. So transport accounts for 18% of carbon dioxide emissions in Hong Kong. So that's something now the government has said, no more non-EV vehicles starting 2035, not only for individual users, but also commercial fleet. Your vans, your trucks, delivery between Hong Kong and even with mainland China. That's also now, the government is looking into how to move more towards an electric vehicle future. That's something I still think it's so behind. We have 11,000 EVs in Hong Kong, the private vehicles, I mean, and the electric vehicle to charger ratio is 5 electric vehicles for every 1 charger. Again, the charging infrastructure needs to be updated. There needs to be, a lot of investment put in there so that it becomes a norm and not just, some people buying Teslas and driving them in Hong Kong.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the same the world over. I know from my own experience, I tried to plug in my car into an electric charger in Ireland last week. Drove to 2 chargers, neither of them worked. There was serious range anxiety happening there. But yeah, 2 follow-up questions from that. One is, my goodness, how on earth do they think that they can get to a zero carbon economy with only 10 or 15% of renewables in the entire mix? That's the other way around for what the rest of the planet is trying to do. They're trying to get it up to 70, 80, 85% of renewables and then fill in the gaps with the rest. I understand that there isn't an awful lot of land mass that you can use for renewables on Hong Kong. It's an island, that's life. But it puts an awful lot more pressure on people like yourself who are trying to make efficiencies, drive efficiencies from buildings. How can you deal with that type of pressure? Do you think that you can be shouldering the burden that the rest of the planet is asking renewables to be shouldering?
Yeah, so on the renewable side, I think there are 2 major initiatives. Even though we don't have the utility scale renewable here, the government did introduce feed-in tariff scheme to incentivize rooftop solar. And although in the beginning, there was this sense in the people that, there's not enough land, or I don't have enough space to put up a rooftop panel in my house in Hong Kong, right? But there are some areas in new territories, there are village houses that have ample space and the right kind of structure, and they're also the landowners. So that's an important thing as well, that you must own the building to actually put a rooftop solar on it. And a lot of real estate in Hong Kong is leased. So that also brought in its own challenge. But I did see like residential side, especially new territories, but also commercial side, leaning in more to put rooftop solar on their buildings so that they could meet their sustainability goal, at least through that amount. And also the cost side of it, looking into payback of such kind of investments. The other piece is the renewable energy certificates. So that's something also that the government has introduced. And again, we see corporates buying more of these renewable energy certificates, because if you cannot, again, have the physical installations, these are various ways in which at least there is some direction towards increasing awareness of renewable energy in Hong Kong. When we come to the more building side, how we can focus on energy reduction or carbon dioxide reduction right now, that has been an exciting space for me to be in, to be honest. It started off with me working at Schneider Electric, where I was looking into the technology startups that are that are installed on top of existing building systems to make them more efficient. And usually in a building, the heating, ventilation, air conditioning is what consumes the maximum energy. Around, we could say 40 to 60% of the energy in a building is consumed by these systems. And these systems, the equipment itself, have a life of 20 to 30 years. So the solution is not usually, okay, let's just replace this equipment. But there are many efficiencies that can be gained by either getting the data from these equipment and utilizing and learning about that data and then deploying some strategies to make the equipment efficient, or just having some control on the equipment which is intelligent, using artificial intelligence. So that has been the focus for me in the last few years. Look into the technology either coming from Australia, the US, Singapore, and then see how can we bring this technology to buildings in Hong Kong and make them commercialized, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not a showcase, or it's not a, this is how you can use it in one building. That's not the objective. The objective is that it works in one building, and then you scale it up to the portfolio of buildings. And the target is, commercial property owners who own shopping malls, data centers, or office spaces. These are the major consumers of electricity, and they are now looking into how can they make their portfolio of buildings more energy efficient.
Okay, and can we put some numbers on that? Like if If you go into a building, just a building which doesn't have any smart technologies in it, what type of efficiencies can you get at a first sweep of it? And if the electricity price goes up, let's say doubles, what can you then be justifying economically to be installing? What type of efficiencies can you get to?
Yeah, I would look at it, look into the building from two perspectives. One side is the operational side, which is more the chiller plant side of the building, where you can get the most energy saving. So if we can make that system more efficient, it can help save up to 20 to 30% of energy in a year, right? Every year you can have about 20 to 30% saving. For a building owner, that kind of energy saving is quite substantial. And the other way to look at it is more on the tenant side. It's the people who are occupying the building, and the lighting and the air conditioning in this space, that can also be optimized. It can just be, turning off the light when no one is using a room, or not having the temperature at 18 degrees Celsius the whole day, because, based on the temperature outside, you should be adjusting the indoor temperature. But we really freeze in Hong Kong offices because they also have to maintain the humidity. They also have to maintain the CO2 level indoor. So there are these various factors in a building that come into play, and maintaining these different parameters affect the energy consumption. So at the end of the day, the building owner or the building manager has to take a call. What is more important, the comfort or the energy saving part? And how do I balance these two for my building? That's one of the major challenges of any building manager.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can remember walking around Hong Kong and being bakingly hot outside, wearing t-shirts and a pair of trousers, and going into department stores and having to take a jacket with me because it's so cold inside. It always baffled me, but it's just how people seem to like it in Hong Kong.
Yeah, exactly. But I actually worked with one of the office owners who are looking into automation of the temperature setting, so that it's not set at one level throughout the day, let's say 18 degrees throughout the day, and then you have staff complaining at different times in the day that, oh, I'm feeling too hot or I'm feeling too cold, and then they're calling the facility management company to adjust the temperature. Some buildings in Hong Kong are so old that the thermostat is on the ceiling. Literally, the facility manager has a ladder that he takes over to the site and adjust the temperature manually. This still happens in Hong Kong in some buildings. So, when you're looking into energy saving, you have to start with automation and remote control. So in some buildings, we do have to do that, and that's usually retrofit. But you would see even in some of the newer buildings, there is still opportunity. Even if it's a new build, it still has an opportunity to be more optimized and to save energy. It doesn't mean that if it's a brand new building, there's nothing that can be done. Because at the time of design and at the time of operation, these are two different phases of the building, and there's always opportunity there. The good thing is that property owners are realizing this, and they are also seeing the value of saving energy and saving their carbon dioxide emission.
Okay, so you say that we can save 20 to 30% of the cooling costs, the heating and cooling costs with energy efficiencies, and about 60% of the entire energy consumption of Hong Kong is from buildings. What other savings can you make? Like what of the total, that 60%? How much do you think efficiencies and your type of things that you're working on can take that 60% down from current levels? Can you halve it? How ambitious can you be?
If we did that, for every building, it could come down to maybe 30%. There's another way or perspective to look into the other savings that we also are generating from deploying technology like this, which automates and makes your equipment more efficient by optimizing it. One thing is the payback is something that the property owner definitely looks into. So if we are saying that we can get 20 to 30% saving, and the property owner is spending on this technology, The payback for this kind of technology is actually 1 to 2 years. It's not that much, right? So this particular, like this technology product that I've been working with from Australia, it's actually a mini computer, an edge device, which is very easy to install on top of the building management system of a building, takes the data from the building management system, and then runs a prediction of the cooling load of the building. It would predict, okay, how much does the building need to consume? And then it decides which equipment needs to put in order, or what temperature should the water actually flow, what is the rate at which the water should flow. Put all these variables into a place to make it the most optimal performance of the building. And then it takes the action to execute this at all the equipment level. So this part, this exact thing which this device does, is currently being done manually in most buildings, or by the building management system to some extent. But it's not taking it to the next level where it can get this energy efficiency, because having to monitor and then work on at least 20 different variables in a building, you humanly cannot do that, right? So if you bring in this, you're saving this time that these engineers are working on the building, just changing different temperatures all day. They can instead focus on critical issues in the building, something break down, more focus on that, and let the building run in a more efficient way. We also face this resistance that this thing is going to just replace me. It's actually not true. You still need the expertise there, but you rather spend that expertise on more critical issues, which this system can actually notify you of. So that's how I think that there's of course the energy saving part, but there's also this manpower that we are saving their time, and that time is always money in Hong Kong.
And can these type of technologies also be used in a residential context, or do economies of scale just mean that at least currently they're restricted to large commercial buildings?
This kind of technology, this particular one, is more focused on commercial heating ventilation systems. At the residential level, yes, there are steps that people can take at the home level. But in my personal opinion, something like smart home or Internet of Things based home, IoT home, hasn't really picked up in Hong Kong. It's very niche and very few people are doing it. To be honest, the electricity bill in homes is not as high in Hong Kong. It's a regulated business for electricity supply, and the level of the unit rate is 1 Hong Kong dollar per unit of electricity. So it doesn't incentivize people to really save from the save energy perspective. It doesn't really incentivize at the residential level. Technology does exist, yes, but whether people are open to adopt it at this stage, I don't think so.
Okay, so on a kind of a macro picture, what part do you think that the broadest sense of building management, and that includes kind of residential IoT, will play in the overall energy transition, not just in Hong Kong, but globally? Do you think it'll be a major part, absolutely crucial, or do you think it has its role to play, but there are bigger fish out there? Where do you see technology in the energy transition space?
I see technology as the enabler for all of these targets that are being set up and these plans that are being devised. In my experience, having seen how a particular technology can help save energy, that has really it's convinced me that this is possible. It's not that hard, that it looks as it looks. And if we have the right knowledge and we do it in the right way, it's possible on a bigger scale. And actually, there are a lot of targets and internationally approved standards that have been set. There's the Green Building Council. There is also the way that you measure energy saving and the way that you quantify energy saving, which is by the International Performance and Measurement Verification Protocol. So if you are doing it in a standard way across different buildings, it is possible to have a major impact. So I do think that technology is the way forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you make a very persuasive case. the best way of trying to prevent carbon emissions is by not using them in the first place. And could you possibly lay out why you think that your particular space, your particular niche in technology and how technology interacts with energy would be a good place for people to be focusing either their time or their career or their money? Why should we be passionate about what you're passionate about?
Because I don't think that what I'm now doing in the energy and the technology sector is just limited to energy. When we start looking into decarbonization, my focus is how this technology is helping to meet decarbonization goals. So when we're looking into decarbonization and looking into reducing carbon dioxide emission, it's no longer just an energy industry issue. Different type of industries now are looking into how can they reduce their own carbon dioxide emissions. I recently interacted with an auction house that was looking into a sustainability policy. So last year, they looked into all their emissions coming from either shipping, logistics, buildings, and it means shipping paintings or shipping artwork from all over the world. And that was a major factor of their emissions. You wouldn't see an auction house looking into their carbon dioxide emissions 10 years ago, but it's happening now. And you wouldn't think that coming from energy background, you'd look for a job in an auction house. But if they have a sustainability team, and if they are looking into it, today they are seeing where are these emissions. Now they need to work on how to reduce these emissions. So that was one example of a very non-energy sort of industry. But you have Google, you have Amazon, you have all these big players now looking into their own decarbonization strategies and also creating new technology and innovative ways of combating that. So I think, it's no longer limited to just this energy industry.
We're both London Business School alumni. If you were talking to other London Business School alumni, what would you tell them? How can they make money out of this? Why should they be interested in this purely on the financial side? Look, I fully appreciate what you're saying, but if you're talking about the hard-nosed LBSers, how are you selling them?
I think LBSers are either in investment or consulting, right? So let's say if your investment, that's already booming, all the investment into renewable energy, solar, wind, coming out of China or India right now, the biggest solar installers at the moment. There are so many different projects that one can put money in. And then on the consulting side, all these companies that are wanting to have a decarbonization strategy, they don't know how. They need experts in sustainability, in carbon reduction, in ESG. And there's a huge opportunity there, not only in terms of guiding or setting that strategy, but on the other end of it is the implementation as well. I would say the kind of work I am doing is more on this implementation side, where I'm helping reduce the carbon dioxide emission in buildings by helping reduce the energy consumption in buildings through technology, installing hardware, software solutions that can help optimize buildings so then they reduce their carbon emission. But there are many, many other ways of achieving that reduction in carbon dioxide.
Fantastic. And if there's one thing that both consultants and bankers want, it's numbers. Okay, so I think to summarize then, taking it from the top, we started with the kind of ambitious targets or the ambitious goals set by the Hong Kong government for decarbonisation, and that has encouraged buildings to be looking towards their energy efficiencies, and that's then also filtered down into the people doing their daily jobs, and improvements are made via technologies and systems to be trying to get increasing amounts of efficiencies from existing infrastructures, improved, tweaked rather than rebuilt infrastructures. And with all of that, if it can be spread out more and more, very significant, or at least significant savings in the energy consumption of the city can be made. Was that a fair summary of what you were saying?
Yes, I think that is a great summary, Chris. I just would like to add one more thing, which would be, to bridge this gap with at the government level goals for decarbonization and what private entities are doing today. It may sound unrealistic to put more targets or to think of, oh, we need to again look into what kind of decarbonization goals or strategies we need to set. But if we don't know where to start, how to start reducing the carbon dioxide emission, from where, then it won't happen. So there is a need for private entities and organizations to take a stock of what is consuming the most carbon dioxide emissions from their operations and probably start there. That's the easiest way to begin, because it won't happen in one go.
Really, absolutely fantastic point. Unless we understand the levels of carbon that are being put out by companies, by buildings, and by particular subsets of the companies and buildings, you don't know what you're fighting against. And if you don't know what you're fighting against, you're never going to win. And it is a fantastic point, and it's one that isn't made enough. We're running up against some very serious deadlines here to try and decarbonize the planet, to try and avoid the worst impacts of CO2 and climate change. And very few people are talking, like you are, on, well, what are our emissions? How are we managing? What do we need to attack? What do we need to battle? That's an absolutely fantastic point, and more people need to be understanding that. Thank you very, very much for your time here. I think that's a really, really good point to be leaving it on. And hopefully this has been useful for people. And thanks for listening, and thanks very much, Kritika, for coming. And I know it's incredibly late now in Hong Kong, so again, thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you, Chris.
Well, thank you very much for joining us on that conversation. We hope that you enjoyed it. We hope that you learned something. If you did enjoy it, please feel free to leave a 5-star review and to subscribe to any of our channels, and we'll be sure to keep you updated on future productions. This series is produced by United Renewables in collaboration with the London Business School Alumni Energy Club.